Okay guys, I'm going to give you a quick rundown on spooling up a rod and reel combo. This is a spinning rod and reel combo. This is a very typical rod that you would see throughout the freshwater scene. 7.5 foot rod. The reel size is about a 3,000 size. A lot of times you're going to see anywhere from a 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 size reel is typically going to be the most common one you're going to see in the freshwater game. Now we have 10-pound braid, and I like a good braid. I think a good braid is really hard to beat. You have a lot of longevity, positive hook setting power, excellent casting distance. Getting a good high quality braid is probably gonna cover 90% of what you wanna do. And I'm gonna spool this up as if I were in the boat. Aside from having the pro spooler here, the biggest thing is just getting your line to unravel off of the spool. Now, you're always gonna incorporate a little bit of line twist, and that's a big question for a lot of people is how do I mitigate line twist? Well, you can't. That's the bottom line, because the spool that the line comes on is a much different diameter than the spool that the line is actually going on to. Now, depending on the size of the arbor, you can mitigate a little bit of that, but for the most part, you're always gonna introduce a little bit of twist into your line. Not a big deal with braid. So the first thing I like to do is recognize, okay, I have this size spool, arbor. Now, if you're running a larger size arbored spool, you can bump up to a bigger mono. I just like having a cheap mono to use as my backing. The smaller the arbor spool, the smaller diameter mono I'm gonna use. You can fill up a spool a lot quicker with a larger diameter, but I want to appropriately size my mono to my size reel. So today we have 8-pound, and I'm gonna put that on first as my backing, and I'm gonna show you how I do that. Again, I like to keep this simple. I don't tie any fancy knot to I don't do any arbor knot or anything like that. Like I said, I'm gonna do this as if I was out in the boat. I like something quick and simple and something I don't have to fight with when I'm out in the elements. I just do a simple loop my line together, do a simple loop knot. Okay. Now a lot of times that knot is never going to see the light of day. If it does, you have bigger problems. I'll come back through, loop that line through itself. And you can come through the guides if you'd like, it doesn't matter. Be sure to always, open your bail, and we're gonna take that loop knot and we're just gonna slide it over the arbor and cinch it down. Now from there, I grab the line, and this is where you wanna loop around your arbor. So I'm just doing like a simple little loop, half hitch loop. And I do that a few times. And the reason for that is I'm not putting more knots into the arbor. I'm just giving it a way to really cinch down and tighten up. And what's gonna happen is that mono has some stretch in it, and once I start packing the reel, it's gonna really tightly grab onto that arbor, therefore eliminating any slip. We like to fish in a lot of different climates. It gets cold, it gets hot, it gets cold, it gets hot. And a lot of time you have expansion and contraction of the line and the spool or what have you. And if you were to run a straight braid right to your reel, a lot of times that line, that braided line is gonna spin on the arbor of the spool. So by doing this, you are eliminating any of that. And I'll pack on some mono, and I'll keep it nice and tight as I do this. And then I'll just rotate the spool as need be to get rid of any line twist. But what I'm essentially wanting to do is put just enough mono on here to cover my knot, because we're laying down a foundation for the braid. And I don't want that knot to be protruding off of the spool. I'll watch my knot and make sure my knot is nice and flush and free from obstruction, because once I start laying the braid on here, that braid is going to lay down really nicely onto the spool. Now from here, we have our backing. And again, we have a nice 10-pound high vis. I like a high vis line. I like to do a fair bit of scoping, and I like to fire out a cast, and I can, really track that high vis line really well. I can also detect, a good bite. That line will jump off the end of my rod, and I can see that high vis line pop. From here, we're gonna do a simple Albright knot. It's usually the one I like to tie. It's quick, it's low profile, and it just works well. And again, I like to match my backing to roughly the same size diameter of braid that I'm putting on. We'll cinch up that little Albright knot. Cut the tag ends nice and short, make sure it's a good cinched up knot. And then from there, we'll start packing it onto the reel. And if I had to guess, there's probably 50 yards of backing on here. Maybe not that much, but now I don't have anything. There's no hiccups in the line. That knot's not protruding out for the braid to catch on. And I like to apply a little bit of pressure, not too much, because the more pressure you apply, a lot of times the more that line will tend to pool toward the top of your arbor. So just a little pressure goes a long way, and we just start winding it on nice and smooth. See that spool fill up nice and clean. What that's going to allow you to do is be able to cast farther with the appropriate amount of line on here. And casting distance to me is a pretty big deal. I want to be able to fire out a cast 100 feet real easily, So having enough line on your spool, and I might tend to run on the side of over spooling than under spooling. I'd rather have an over spooled reel than an under spooled reel. So right about there, that looks to be about a good, over 100 yards of line. And you can see that that line is nice and packed onto the reel. It's semi-tight. And then once you get about to the finish line here, you can start to loosen up the pressure that you apply on the line itself. We'll cut our line here. We have a nice spool of braid. And one thing I'll note when you get done with this and you begin fishing, I always manually open and close my bail. You have to open it obviously anyways, but after the cast, a lot of times I'll just manually close that bail. Make sure the line is seated on your roller. You turn that into a habit and it becomes second nature, and you don't even have to look down to see that you're, closing the bail and making sure the line is on the roller. That a lot of times can help prevent your wind knots. So that's how I spool up my spinning reels.